I want to welcome you and say hi after a holiday weekend here in the US to everyone that's joining us today and for another session, another edition of our Credit Safe webinars. Have a absolutely fantastic webinar planned for you today, and I'm super excited to get into it and give you a chance to meet our panelists and talk about this awesome topic. But first, just a couple of things so that you understand how this all works if you're joining us for the first time. At the bottom of your screen that you're seeing now, your Zoom screen, you can see that there is a little text bubble that says Q&A. This is your way to communicate with me. My name is Nathan Kolb. I'm the host of this webinar. It's your way to communicate with me. If there's a question you'd like to ask, a comment you'd like to make, please go ahead and put that right in there and let us deal with that and work with that. It may take me a few minutes. I don't want to interrupt our speakers. I don't want to interject something that doesn't fit within the flow of everything, but I will get to your questions. We do want your involvement. So feel free, please put that information in there. Ask those questions. If you have a question specific to one of the panelists, say that. If it's general to the panel, that's fine. You don't have to put anybody's name or anything like that. But I want to have that in there, and those will be put out throughout. So you don't have to hold those to the end. If it doesn't make sense to interject it right at that time, I won't. But as long as it makes sense, I'll put it in. We'll get the question answered, and we'll go on from there. So I want to leave as much time as possible for our panelists, who I'm going to just very, very briefly introduce here, and then let them kind of speak on their own behalf. But first and foremost, Matthew Debbage, the CEO of Credit Safe Americas and Asia, COO of Credit Safe Group, will be moderating this panel. So if you've seen our webinars before, Matthew's been a speaker frequently for us. This time he's going to be moderating the panel. Luca Berti is going to be one of our panelists. He's here. He is the country manager for Italy, for Credit Safe Italy. And then Per Fjerestad is the country manager for Norway and part of the Scandinavian management group. So he's going to be in here as well. I'm going to let them take it away. That's what you came to see, not me. So Matthew, I'm going to turn it over to you to take care of things now.
Thank you very much, Nathan, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for attending today. I think it's going to be a very interesting session. Obviously, the objective of this webinar is to talk about the impact of COVID on European business, in particular Italy and the Scandinavian region. So if we briefly touch on Italy, first of all, I think we've all seen in the news, and we all know very well that Italy has been the most affected country in Europe. It was the country that was hit first. It's had an absolutely devastating impact on the economy. Projections say probably about, it will shrink probably by about 9%. The financial consequences of the pandemic are having a dramatic impact on the survival of many businesses in Italy. However, there is light at the end of the tunnel, with Italy carefully reopening for business. So today we're going to find out much more about what's going on in Italy, and in particular we're going to focus on the risk of extending credit to Italian businesses and how Credit Safe can support you through these challenging times. And then what's really interesting is if we contrast Italy with Scandinavia, who have dealt with COVID in a very different way. In particular, Sweden, who looked to mitigate the economic impact of the coronavirus by not shutting down its economy. And really, it's probably one of the only countries in the world that has remained fully open during this time. However, data released last week by the country's central bank suggests its economy will be just as badly impacted as its European neighbours, if not worse. And this is primarily because its exports have been hit so hard, as well as its supply chains. So what we've done today is prepared 4 questions for the panelists. And it's really, the first one's really focused on what actually happened in their country and how business was affected. The second question concentrates on the status of today. So how are businesses coping today? The third question is about the information CreditSafe provides in these countries and how we can support you. And then the final question is very much about the predicted future outlook for these countries. So if I can start with the first question then to the panelists, what major steps were taken to help control the spread of the COVID-19 virus in your country, and how did that affect business? So maybe if I turn over to you, Luca, first of all.
Okay. So first of all, good evening to all. Maybe I should say good afternoon for the US citizen, but anyway, we are amidst this, so it's evening here. So that's a complicated question, Matthew, because we had, plenty of decision during the lockdown period. I try to summarize just to give you an idea of what's happened here. So we had the first signal of the virus around February the 21st in few towns in Lombardy, a region in the north of Italy. But it's important, this region, because it's the Italian business heart, which is also one of the heavily populated area of Europe. That's important also. And that day we had around 16 cases, but unfortunately this number rose to 16 the next day. And we had the official dead due to the virus the next day. So we had the first lockdown in only 11 towns, the 23rd, but the 9th of March, the Prime Minister extended the lockdown area to the entire Lombardy region. And only 2 days after, we had the final decisions about the full lockdown. So everything happened in 20 days. So the lockdown imposed the suspensions of all the economic activities, and except for strategical and crucial for like food delivery, food retail, transport, energy, supply and healthcare, obviously. And the first result was that almost 60% of the company in the Northwest and almost 50% in the South decided to stop any business. And only those who were able to switch business model in a few time remained open, like us. We did it. And we were able to maintain with the business as usual, even if all the employees were working at home. But obviously in the business to business arena, it is not enough. You can't have only one component of the equations alive. You need both sides. You need someone that sells and someone who is wanted to buy, So we saw a general contractions in terms of revenue, and we had a very, very important impact. And we are talking about an estimation of, yes, between 6% of the GDP to 9% of the GDP. That's the estimation of the impact in this moment. That's what's happened at the beginning.
So Per, because we just had a few technical, could you sort of give your answer, Per, as far as Scandinavia is concerned?
Yes, in difference from Italy, we didn't have a complete lockdown in Scandinavia in general. We had quite a lot of restrictions, and even in Scandinavia, there's difference, as you already mentioned, Matthew. So what actually happened, the first sign of this crisis was due to export and import and supply chains. For instance, it started up in China, and Norway is quite reliable on or depending on export and import or export of fish to China. So that was the first kind of impact we had, but we didn't do anything before it hit Europe. And when it got the COVID-19 to Scandinavia in mid-March, Denmark and Norway more or less shut down part of the business. The business we have interactions with other people like health institutions, hairdressers, restaurants, culture and events, and traveling, all that kind of business closed down. But in Sweden, they kept it open. they had kind of advised and recommended the citizen to have social distancing, but they didn't close down. And it's just as you said, I think that was trying to keep the everything running and keep the economy running as well. What is interesting is that we had kind of immediately hit in some business, branch related. So you had kind of a total shutdown, and you have and the economic impact was kind of a collapsing of the economy in those sectors, but other sectors still kept up running. So that's kind of I think the difference from northern part of Europe to the southern part of Europe, that we still have some of the business up and running. So it's all branch related. And that is interesting in kind of a credit view, because normally when you predict the risk or you predict the future, or you look into the financial part of the business, but this kind of crisis revealed that it was not necessarily the financial status of the companies that was decided what's going to happen, but there was the branches. So that's how it hit in Scandinavia. And what he's going to look into now is the papers coming out, as you already mentioned, is the economic and how it's going to be in the future. And it looks like the Sweden and Norway and Denmark will have the same problems and the same kind of recession in the economy, even though they have different measurements on how to deal with this. And it's going to be different from the southern part of Europe in general. So that is one thing that we need to look into as well, because there has always been difference in the economy from the northern part into the southern part of Europe. And I think that difference is going to be increased by this conflict. By this economic recessions.
So, Luca, in terms of what's happening today in Italy, where what is the status? Are businesses open for business now? What's going on with the tourism?
Yeah.
What's happening?
So now at the moment we are living the phase 2, Matthew, and this means that majority of the companies are now active again. So considering that we have 4.4 million of active company in Italy, and the estimation is that only 800,000 at the moment are still not operative. So almost the majority of the company are active now. Obviously, the revenue valuation of the suspended company is around 70% of the global GDP. So they are important, but not crucial, in our opinion. So the aspect I think that is more clear if we analyze the sector. So we have 83% of the accommodation and food services closed. 22% of travel agency, rental services, general services still closed, and 100% of all the companies related to entertainment, artistics activities, sport activity closed. But again, we are reopening, so the government is analyzing new measures, new instructions in order to let them able to open all the activities, also for the tourism, because it's very important. So we smell that something probably will happen at the beginning of June, but we have to wait. But yes, in this moment, we are seeing a restart. And we see these results, obviously, with our customers, because they are more active, they are available, they answer to the phone, they would like to talk about renewal now. That was impossible a month ago. So things are changing, but obviously it takes time. So I think that we are going to face a tricky summer, obviously, in particular for the tourist-related activities.
Great, thanks, Luca. So Per, like today then in Scandinavia, what is actually, I mean, it's remained open. Are you seeing bankruptcies increasing? Is there been stimulus packages from the government and that sort of thing?
Yes, there's been stimulus packages from the government, and first of all, they are the stimulus package is to keep the business floating, I would guess. So what's going to be interesting is what the next step is going to be, because we need stimulating packages to pick up the economy as well, to stimulate the economy. So for the bankruptcy, it's very interesting. You have had a major increase in bankruptcies in Sweden, but in Norway, it is the same as at the same period last year. It's even decreasing a bit. So what is happening in Norway is that it's kind of silent before the storm. They're expecting a wave of bankruptcies coming later on. And that is because all of the uncertainties, we don't know anything. I mean, that's the whole, the whole thing about this COVID-19 is that we don't know. It's so much uncertainties. So they're sitting and waiting, and they are waiting for the packages and holding on to it. But it is going to break. So they're expecting the bankruptcy in Norway coming a little bit later on. About the finance packages thing, that's an interesting topic as well, because it is difficult to make that kind of a fair solution. It seems like the package in Norway, they might the government might spend money on businesses that would have survived unsupportedly. And they are even spending money on keeping business alive that would have gone bankrupt even without the crisis. So that is what's kind of picking up when you look into the statistics for bankrupts as well. So that's something we need to look into.
Right. And I would imagine most people who are attending today's webinar are obviously going to be very interested in how safe it is to extend credit to the Italian, Scandinavian regions, which leads me on to the next question.
Matthew, if I could break in for 1 second, we do have a question on that for Luca. Luca, do you know what percentage of the retail sector is actually operating right now in Italy? We have a question from our audience for that.
In this moment, the retail is reopening. So in this moment, the activities are, lower than the normal, but the sector is reopening as well. So I would say that we are close to 100%, but obviously with different performances. That's quite expected, as Per said. So it's not only connected to the situation of the economy, it's only connected to the new behavior of the people. So people are less willingly they have to re-understand, re-metabolize everything in order to restart a normal life. So maybe the activities are open, but the usage of these activities and the business of this activity obviously is lower than the normal. Sure. And it takes a little bit of time.
Thank you.
Yeah, so guys, just as far as your information and data for each of your countries and the region of Scandinavia, how are we supporting our customers during this time? What's happening with the information? Is it updating? Are new accounts still being published? Is negative data still around? How are we going to support our global customers during this challenging time with data in your countries?
Yes, I could talk for Scandinavian or the northern part of Europe. So the availability of the data is the same. We do get the data, we do get the finance accounts coming in, and the House of Commerce is up and running, and all the bankruptcy information is coming in as it used to do. So we do have the same kind of information in our solutions as we used to have. But what is interesting is that due to this incident of the COVID-19, we need to look into additional data. Because, as I said previous today, you cannot only rely on financial data, on payment remarks, as we used to do. And for the scorecards, the scorecard is still up and running, and they are predicting as they used to do, but there is so much uncertainties coming into related to, for instance, to branches or sectors or different countries. The risk is different in different countries, and even in the small countries, Norway, there's difference suddenly in the eastern part and western part, because the western part is relying on the oil business and tourists. So that's kind of additional information we need to look into and to help our customers to analyze. But that's more or less day to day, because it's very, very difficult to predict anything. To predict what's going to happen or to predict the risks that's going to appear in the future, we need to look into the back, to rear view mirror, see what led to this. Well, what is the reasons? What's the cost to what happens? And if you look into the rearview mirror today, there's nothing. You didn't see this. Previously, finance crisis, you can look into it and you can look into it and you can see, okay, this is just a regular market mechanism. It's bad debts, it's banking crisis. It could be it's a crisis in supplying of oil or all different kind of market mechanism leading up to a crisis. For this crisis, nothing like that. So that's what we need to help our customers or clients with.
Are you familiar with how they're paying their bills at the moment, Per? Are Swedish companies paying on time? Because they're always the best, one of the best countries in the world for paying on time. Has there been any change there?
Not significant, actually. So, but obviously, there's some they're struggling a little bit more, and they might ask for a little bit longer payment terms. But and of course, there is a lot of companies going bankrupt, and if you go bankrupt, you don't pay. That's what's happening. But in general, it's still fairly good. And I have to say that's if you look pre-COVID-19. And that's what you're probably referring to. So doing business in Norway or doing business in Scandinavia is what I would call low-risk countries in general, because they have strong economy, they're quite a resilient economy as well, and data availability and is very high, and we're depending on automatic solutions and it's very well run. So there's still that part is still a part of the Scandinavian economy. But then you have all this uncertainties. So makes even in the countries, we are a lot more cautious than we used to be. We need to take our precautions and going back to maybe more like manual credit management.
Yeah, just one more question before we go on to find out more about Italy. Obviously, as we know, Scandinavia is normally a very safe region to do business with. They tend to pay on time. You're saying there hasn't been a big movement so far, which is really positive, apart from asking for things like payment holidays and things like this, extended payment terms. So culturally, a Scandinavian company is more likely to ask for that rather than paying late, aren't they?
Yes, I think so. Absolutely. So, yeah.
Okay. So, Luca, as far as Italy is concerned, what's happening with the information? Are you offering any additional services for your customers during this period?
So first, I think that it's important to say that we didn't have any disruptions in terms of data supply. So we are receiving all the information during the lockdown period. Obviously, it is impossible in this moment to make any analysis of the bankruptcy because considering the measure that the government launched during the lockdown, all the measure were absolutely the aim of the measure was to keep all the company alive and keep safe all the employees. So as an information provider, I think that I would say that we can be over conservative, Matthew. because and overprotective in terms of business risks, because otherwise we could compromise any results in this period. So on the other hand, obviously, it's important to consider, I think, data as one of the main assets for any company ever, and probably during this time more than ever. So for these reasons, we decided to develop our impact indicators in order to help our customers, to understand the impact of the partners during the lockdown. And it is a blend, this indicator, of our historical data sets, updated daily with all the information we have, and an analysis of the National Statistic Institute. And this institute provided a very detailed analysis of the impact sector, economic sector by economic sectors. So we didn't use only the indication of the institute, obviously, but we included this information into our algorithm in order to avoid, a polarization of the results on the extreme values, and in order to avoid to rate different companies with different assets and financial capabilities with the same impact only because they belong to the same economic sectors. So we did it, and we provided this information for free because I think it's important to help our companies and our business partners in this moment. And at the same time, we decided to extend also for free the contract duration for the most impacted customers for 2 months in order to help them to manage the lockdown periods. And I think that we had a very good answer, a very good feedback from our customers following this policy. As a business provider, I think what we can do is try to share our information in this moment because they are absolutely one of the most important things to do. We don't have to think first the business in this moment. So we are sitting, we are helping our customers because our customers are our future.
Fantastic, Luca. So probably the hardest question of all is my last question, which is about predicting the future outlook in your countries. Where do you think, what state do you think businesses will be in 6 months' time in your country? And I'd also love to hear your view on Europe generally as well. So maybe you start with you, Per.
Yeah, well, you're right. That is a difficult question, and I already mentioned that it's impossible to predict. I would say almost impossible because it's nothing in the rearview mirror to hang on to. And if you read some reports, the latest EU report is quite positive, I think, about the economy is going to pick up whenever the different kind of containment measurements are lifted or the economic sanctions are lifted. But I'm not too sure about that. I think we will have a quite long period of economic problems even in the northern part of Europe, because I don't think necessarily the economic will pick up as soon as you're lifting up with the sanctions, the restrictions. And one of the reasons that I'm saying that is that what the latest papers is showing, and that you've already been referring to, it seems that it's not a kind of connection in between the shutdown and the spendings for the business runnings. And one way to look into it is if you look into the private consumption, that actually is the backbone of the economic growth in Europe. The private consumptions don't pick up even if they are lifting up for the restrictions. It shows that in Sweden, and it will show that in Norway as well. And I think that will go for the business as well. But then again, it depends on if the government is able to kind of stimulate the economy to pick up. But I think it will be a long recession, and I think the way we're doing credit will, I'm talking about Scandinavia, will change in the future. I think we will stick to maybe be a lot more cautious and do a lot more manual credit management. So for 6 months, or it is going to be difficult, but I think we have quite a long period of recession in the economy.
Right.
Actually, and that's if you look into it, that's one of the point is at the moment everyone is sitting and awaiting what's going to happen.
Yeah,
it's kind of yeah.
So Luke, I mean, obviously before the COVID crisis, Italy was having a few problems, wasn't it? Anyway, so with this sort of double hit, where do you see the economy heading, businesses? What will they look like in 6 months? I didn't ask you earlier about things like stimulus packages and things like that. The government in Italy may be
we have to consider all. Yeah. So Matthew, if I had the right answer, probably I would be the richest man in Europe in this moment. But no, anyway, I'm just kidding. So no one has a crystal ball, me neither. So I think that we need to, design a scenario based on assumption. So we have to make some assumption, because otherwise it's quite impossible. So first, I think that one of the most important things we have to understand the way our government is managing is the cash flow problem of our companies. So they need liquidity, cash, as soon as possible. On the other hand, our government is providing a sort of indirect help, because they are providing 100% of guarantees for loans. But again, the internal bank's procedure are really slow in this moment. So the money are struggling in order to pop up in the company bank accounts. So that's a problem. So we need to improve this process as soon as we can. Second, that's the problem, even if the loan are completely covered by the states, we smell that, banks are selecting customers in order to have zero risk in this moment. And I think it's not so fair in this period. So it's important to give money to the companies in order to help them to recover. But again, they need not refundable loans, but it is very connected to EU decision. And you know that in this moment, there is a fight between the North European countries and the South European countries. So we have to understand where the final decision will land. So on the other hand, we had a lot of help thanks to the wage supplementation schemes, which allowed us to keep people employed with 80% of the salary. So, and everything was paid by the state. So we had a very important amount of measures in order to help companies and employees. Now we have to understand how we can restart everything. So I think that in this moment, what is important is that assuming that the containment measure will be gradually lifted, and this measure are loosened and the pandemic remains under control, and the fiscal and the monetary crisis and the measures in order to manage this crisis implemented by the member states and EU will be effective, we should see a rebound around 6% in 2021. So the forecast is to have a rebound in the economy in the next year. Okay, but a crisis during this year, and this is a very asymmetric phenomenon, because even if we are in the same continent, if you compare the speed of the recovery of each country, yes, Italy is the slowest in this moment. That's true, and the fall will be around 9% this year in order to recover 6.5% in next year. So the expectation is to see benefit and the rebound in private consumption in the next year. But that is only, it's an estimation considering and following this assumption. So it's quite complicated.
Okay, thank you, Luca. Nathan, do you have any questions?
I do actually, and I'm gonna. This is for the panel, and I'm even if you'd like to, Matthew, jump in and answer this for the U.S. or for Asia, whichever. But the question is in your specific areas or countries, is there any specific sector or industry that is being seen as a winner during the pandemic? So we've talked a lot about the negatives, but is anybody having a lot of opportunity or positives right now?
Yes, it is.
Okay, Luca, why don't you start us off here?
Yeah, okay. We had an improvements in all the digital arena. So digital e-commerce and also the retails. So everything that was connected to digital approach improved. Obviously, also company that decided to convert their productions into products related to the emergency. So specific tools for dispositive, for the prevention and so on. But in particular, in the digital area, we saw a very important improvement.
Okay. Per?
Yeah, it's more or less the same. You do have companies that have kind of changed the business line to supply what is demanding for this crisis, for instance, and you have parts of the retail business as well, except from the stores, traditional clothing retail stores, it has a problem. But for other retailers, it's doing quite good. And what's interesting, and that's kind of a Scandinavian thing, I think. In Scandinavia, we're very much like to improve our homes, for instance. And as long as staying home, they have a boom for warehouse selling goods for improving homes and gardening. So that's kind of a boom. A business that's running quite well, and of course you have parts of the IT sectors that is doing quite good. That's not depending on people being out shopping. And of course, business that are trading inside Norway or inside Scandinavia is doing a lot better because the supply chains, import export, is having problem.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay.
Yeah.
And Matthew, do you want to answer this one, or do you want to?
Obviously, we've talked quite a lot about what's going on in the US before, but obviously things like grocery stores doing particularly well. There's some really unusual ones that we've mentioned before, like charter flights.
Yes.
It's going through a massive boom as the airlines are grounded. We're seeing lots of those smaller airlines with huge demand. Obviously, the alcohol distributors particularly well during this time. And what the guys have mentioned, people producing rubber for PPE equipment and things of this nature. So there's definitely some winners, but obviously we are seeing most companies have been impacted negatively in some form or another. So, but there are some winners there. And how you adapt, how you change during this period is very interesting to see.
Right. So another question here, and it looks like Luca may have had some technical issues, but we'll hope he can jump back on here, is in regards to, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase this here, in regards to a credit management type idea, when dealing with a US company, when dealing with Europe, should they be changing their model at this point or adopting more of a wait and see kind of step-by-step approach as they go for that?
Yeah, so most, for those who are familiar on what Credit Safe USA has done during this period, the COVID risk matrix that we use alongside the current credit score. Most of our sister companies have adopted a similar approach. So we very much, we've graded companies in the US and certainly in most of our European countries from a grading system of A to E. A's being companies that have been the least impacted by coronavirus, B being the ones affected the most. So what we're really saying is you should use that grading system alongside the credit score. Those companies who had a very bad credit score before the pandemic, who are categorized as E, i.e. severely impacted by coronavirus, and have a bad credit score, that pot of companies, which interestingly is around 6 million in the USA, which is actually quite worrying, there's a different credit management strategy. And the same thing would apply to dealing with European businesses. Sure.
Per or Luca, anything to add? I know, Luca, you may have missed that question, but
sorry,
Per,
I had a problem with my connection.
That's okay. That's okay. It happens. Anything to add there, Per?
No, not necessarily. I do agree with Matthew. That's correct. I think that it's important just to keep business as usual up and running. I think that's what we should do. And if you have a credit management policy or credit management politics, stick to it. And because the scorecards is still relevant, as Matthew was telling you, is a company having a low score. It is a high risk, and it's even higher maybe, or it is higher during this crisis. The only thing is you need to add some information to this, and you need to add information about branches or sectors or parts of the countries that are more affected or has a higher risk. But otherwise, all the information is reliable still and relevant. And the scorecard is relevant. It is more important today to use the scorecards than it was before the crisis, actually.
Sure. Okay. Another question here. We actually were talking about this last week, where the government programs here in the US it's public information, but it's not publicly available on who's received it or what they've received. Is that available in Europe, and is that being put into the scorecard, basically? So the government programs, Per, you had talked about them. Luca, you talked about them a little bit. Is that information available, and is that something that we at CreditSafe are actually using to make, in the scorecards, or how is that working in Europe?
No, we are analyzing all the companies in this moment, but obviously we decided to keep our valuation. We didn't modify, the evaluation because the model is working. But thanks to the impact indicators, and the impact indicators obviously is also considering these measures, our suggestion is to use them in combination, just to use both. So thanks to the impact indicator, we consider all these informations about the helps provided by the governments and so on. But we decided to keep our scorecards alive because they are working as per se, because it's important to keep what is working and what's working in the past in order to manage the situation properly and add new informations with the impact.
So in Italy, that's being added into the impact scores. So it is being factored in there. Per, what about? Go ahead, Matthew.
I think it's important to mention that even in the US, we have access to this data, emergency government loans and things of this nature. We feed this into our payment data, so we see whether people are paying back the loan in time and things of that nature. So it's incorrect to say we don't have access to that data. We actually do.
Okay. Per, what about, for you?
Yeah, it is available data both on who has applied for economic aid and who has received economic aid, but it's not anything that we do have in our scorecards at the moment. But it could be used as a supplement to the scorecards. There is a little bit uncertainty about this, about the companies who's receiving or applying for economic aid, because as up to now, it's been kind of emergency money paid out to certain sectors. It's not money that is stimulating them to keep on running. So, and it's as I mentioned earlier today, the point is it is not necessarily the one who's need help that is receiving help. It seems like you're helping companies that don't necessarily should have this kind of economic aid, and you even keeping business up and running that shouldn't be running. But yes, it is available, and and it's something that we can add to as a supplement to other information.
Right. Okay. Wonderful. That seems to be all the questions. I want to thank you, gentlemen, very much. Matthew, thank you so much for moderating. You took the weight off of me immensely, and that was great. Per and Luca, thank you guys so much for us in the U.S. Just understand too that this is not 2 o'clock. If you're on the East Coast, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 2:30 now. It is what, 8:30, 8:45 in 9, almost 9 in Italy and everything. So these gentlemen have very kindly given up their evenings to talk to us. So I want to thank you guys so much for that. And thank you all for being with us as always. Please don't hesitate to send us any questions that you may come up with later. Contact your account representatives. And just as all of these, you'll be getting an email thanking you for being a part of this and giving you a link to the recording of this webinar so that you can share it with other colleagues or refer back to it. And if you'd like to know any more about the upcoming webinars that we have, please just visit us at creditsafe.com. Go to the B2B webinars or go to the B2B link and click on the webinars, and you'll see all of our upcoming webinars as well as links to all of our previous ones. Gentlemen and everybody watching, thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Yes.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye-bye.